tell from the title, we're looking at orange skin. So if you're in the UK, if you've ever been on a train station on a Saturday in the northwest of England, you'll see plenty of orange skin around there, you know, especially boarding the train to Blackpool. There's herds of people with skin the colour of a hangover piss. Or perhaps more relevant to this, if you've ever watched the news. So these are two figures from a Kickstarter called Make Your Miniatures Collection Great Again. And yeah, they're a couple of parodies of the current president of the US reality TV star Donald Trump. So here we have a little night goblin. He's sort of got that sort of chubby, pouty face that we all know and love, and perhaps even more iconically the self-satisfied grin we see on the ogre here. So it's just a bit of fun, whatever your political persuasion. Will just strap yourself in and take a look at me having a go at orange skin. Okay, here we are. So I've cleaned them up, and they're on the bases. Not a lot to say about the bases, other than for a larger model I'll tend to put a bit more variety on there, just because there's a lot more area sort of visible between the static grass. So we've got a few largish rocks there and two sizes of railway ballast. I've covered this in separate videos, but the buff coloured stuff is medium railway ballast, the dark brown is fine railway ballast, and anything else is a rock. I just find it helps just the base looks a bit less boring without completely going to town on it, because these are things I'm probably never going to use. They're just there for a laugh. Contrast with the wee fella here, this is actually more effort than I'd normally do on a 25mm base, just that putting them rocks on covers up a hole, you know, the old gap where you plug your figure. They're very nice sculpts, and pretty good castings as well, so there's some very fine bits of flesh to remove from the goblin. Bigger lad had a bit of mould slip, but all in fairly out of sight places. So they all came off quite nicely anyway. Very, very pleased with the figures themselves. Well, one last stop before we start to do the actual orange skin tone itself. And that's just that they are primed up now, and I've painted the bases. The reason for that is, well, you can see there the little goblin's feet are utterly base coloured, because I've dry brushed it fairly scruffily. And it just means I can get that message out the way without worrying about my dry brushes going over my paintwork later on. Similarly, there's this gauntlet here that I've also done. That's a bit of a need to dry brush, but it's still, I'd rather do that now rather than getting little flakes of silver onto his arm after I've painted it orange. Speaking of painting things orange, I'm now going to split these two up. So the goblin I intend as a test model, and then whatever I learn about doing orange skin tone here, I'll repeat on the ogre. So it's the last time you'll see them together, I suppose, probably until they're all finished. So let's go paint some skin. And there we have our base coat down, and yeah, that's quite a bold start, really. Yeah, I promised you orange skin tone, and orange skin tone you're gonna get. This is Jacaro orange from Citadel. I will take this down with a wash, and then I think the highlights I'll do less bold. You know, well, I'm winging this one, so you can wing it with me. Okay, that's the wash put on the little goblin there. And alright, a wash is a wash is a wash. But what I was going to do is use Seraphim Sepia, and then I thought actually with the big lad I might be needed to do a bit of blending, so I thought I might be better using paint. So I've gone on with the old flat brown from Model Colour, which is a similar reddish brown. And I just thinned that down with some water and some thinner medium, and that I find makes quite a good wash as well. It's a bit more effort than an ink, but sometimes necessary. Don't know if it's necessary this time, but we'll see when I get to painting the big lad. Okay, the first stage of highlights is just to bring back the raised areas with Jacaro orange. So he's looking extremely orange at the moment. I do want him to look subtly orange, So I'm going to take that up a little more, mix in some flesh colour now. I think I'm going to call it done there for the highlights on his face. That's from before, the Jaquera orange, and I brought it up with quite a lot of dark flesh from model colour. It's a bit more contrasty than I thought, to be honest, but it seems to suit the figure and I'm quite happy with that. So yeah, I'm going to call it a day there, and well, a couple of things to do. Firstly, finish the rest of him, which I'm not going to show on this tutorial because I've done the orange skin. And secondly, do the big fella. But there we go, so that's the recipe for, at least for the little one, the one that requires less blending, is just a base coat of Jaquera orange, paint wash with flat brown. Can do it with an ink, but as I say, I expect I'll be blending a bit more on the ogre here. And then finally to highlight dark flesh. So just 3 colours, and I think it looks alright. Let's do the big lad. And the ogre begins in exactly the same way. Lovely coat of Jaquera orange. And the wash has gone on. So you'll see slightly different tones here. So his face is more heavily washed than his arms and chest and belly and so on, because I want the deeper shadows there around his eyes, nose, mouth and so on, whereas not so much, there's not these like sharp areas of shadow on the rest of him. Also his hands there, so deeper shadows there, and probably unnecessarily the deeper shadows on his spine there, but I will possibly just correct that with a bit of this, because I did anticipate having to do some blending. So now I'll get back to work with the orange and just tidy this up a bit before I start to put highlights on in earnest. So I've reclaimed the upper surfaces with just the pure Jaquera orange. Notice I've missed his foot there. I'll fix that before I go on. The deep shading on his spine did have to go. I probably have to get rid of that even further. And there's a few more like that, so that line there is quite deep shaded, and that might need to be orange. But it'll all sort of emerge really when I start to lighten it with some dark flesh, which I'll do now. I'm not 100% convinced that he looks any different to the last stage, to be brutally honest. But all I've done this time is blended it all up. So I've just taken the orange and the dark flesh and just brought that up to pure dark flesh. At that point, I thought I've gone too far. It doesn't look nearly orange enough. It just looks like a sort of a tanned skin at this point, which that's what Donald's aiming for, but it's not what he's achieving. So I then made a very thin glaze of the Jaquera orange, so quite a bit of that, a good deal of water, and then just took it all back down again. And I think that's looking pretty damn good now. I think we're almost there. So what I want to do is a final highlight. So just the prominent areas around his face, so his cheekbones and his chin, well, some of his chins, at least the first one. But cheekbones, chins, around his ears, possibly his nipples. Don't think about Don's nipples. Don's nipples, whoa. Yeah, just do those things, and then I'm going to call it done. And skip to the end. So here I've skipped right through the important to me, but perhaps less important for the purposes of this video. And here we have the completed figures. So little goblin's got his black robes there and a little shield and so on. And it's nice to see him, you know, complete. He's a daft little figure, and yeah, very happy with the result there. Particularly happy with the Trump ogre though. So there's just a wealth of detail that sort of emerges on this. He's got his gold chain around his neck. That's maybe he's picking out a little more, but oh well, it's done now. Beautiful skull on his belly. Some nice little detail on his trousers there and so on. Round the back I'm particularly pleased with that. So the little pig there, that's using my traditional skin recipe. So use of modelled colour paints and a paint wash of Bugman's Glow from Citadel. Finally got the spine somewhere I'm happy with. And just generally, yeah, I've got no real use for these figures, but nevertheless I am very pleased with them. They can go into a box never to be seen again, but they put a bit of a smile on my face anyway, and hopefully put a bit of a smile on your face too in these times. Well, that's been quite a long video, especially by my standards, and if you're still watching, still listening to my voice after more than 10 minutes, then well done you. You deserve a break now, so I'll get on and do something else. Thanks very much for watching, and hopefully I'll speak to you soon. Ta-ra now.